Former Democrat presidential candidate Marianne Williamson is here. All right, Marianne, pretend I'm a therapist. I'm not going to bill you. Just sit down on the couch at primetime. Tell us what you're upset with, who you're upset with, and why.
Who I'm upset with is a small group of media elite, political elite, and donor elite who have felt that they had the right to strategize for the Democratic Party as opposed to giving the power to the people, the Democratic electorate. If the Democratic electorate had been exposed to their options in this campaign, if for the last year and a half we had had a robust conversation about what was possible, what we should be doing for the American people, what we should articulate as a true alternative to what Donald Trump was offering, what we should do for the American people over the next 4 years, universal health care, tuition-free college and tech school, so many things that we could have done to actually make life better for the 70% of Americans who are economically struggling, for the over 60% of Americans who are living paycheck to paycheck, then we would have won, I believe, or at least we would have given a fight that would have been something to behold. Instead, we had a few of the people who you've heard, that you've had on your show tonight, the same old, same old. It's the culture of the Democratic Party. You said that the American people have rejected the Democratic Party. I don't think the American people have rejected the policies that the Democratic Party has stood for. They rejected this elite, smug, arrogant culture, which acts like a suppressant on the voices of the party. They were more concerned with getting the approval of Liz Cheney than of our traditional Democratic base, some of the people who need the help the most and who have traditionally looked to the Democratic Party to help them. Millions of those people stayed home this time because experience has taught them that there's not much help coming from there. And that's why we lost this election, and that's why these people need to step aside.
Yeah, they did reject the snobbiness and the out-of-touchness. That's true. But they also rejected the governance. The last 4 years were bad. The spending,
well, you think so?
the border,
I don't think it was.
They were bad. Everybody agrees they were bad. But Marianne, we got Barack Obama
Not
and Michelle.
everybody agrees they were bad, but that's okay, Jesse. I get that you think they were bad. So
okay,
go on.
well, if they were good, then Kamala would have won, and Joe would have run for re-election. But they weren't good.
I do think it was go on.
Okay, but
we don't have to
Barack
stay
Obama and Michelle, they're going to be in Hawaii over Thanksgiving. They're back in the mansion. They're going to be eating the turkey, pass the gravy. They're not even affected by any of this. They came in. They pick winners and losers, and then they go back to Honolulu. Is there any accountability for any of these kingmakers, Nancy, Chuck, all these people that orchestrate all this stuff so the people can't decide? Is there any accountability there?
Well, unfortunately, I agree with what you just said about Barack Obama. The Democratic elite needs to face the facts. They have two choices here. They can either take the lid off the voices of the traditional base of the Democratic Party. Remember, we have a populist revolution going on in this country. It is populism versus the establishment. The Republican Party has made room for right-wing populists, but the Democratic Party hasn't wanted to make room for left-wing populists. So they have a choice here. You can either stay where you are and continue to lose, and you will continue to decline in relevancy and political power, or you can step aside. Let the left-wing populists who want to be having a vital conversation let us in, stop suppressing our campaigns, stop knocking us off ballots. And if you don't, those people, let me tell you what's going to happen. They're all going to go third party. They're all going to just figure what's the point of even trying in the Democratic Party anymore. What I'd love to see, Jesse, would be some contrition. What I would love to see is some acknowledgement that that they have to look in the mirror rather than blaming everyone else. And to be honest, I'd like to see some humility. If those things happen, we're on a therapist couch right now, right?
Yes.
If that kind of humility and contrition and acknowledgement, how much these people messed up, if that's forthcoming, then the Democratic Party will have a chance. And that's what I hope will happen, because we're going to be back and we're going to get you in 2026 and we're going to get the House back in 2026, and we need to get started. And we're going to do that, Jesse. We're going to beat you in 2026.
All right. Well, we will see about that. But I do agree that about 75% of the country agrees on most everything. but they just divide us, and that's the problem.
You can look at poll after poll, and actually the Republican as well as the Democratic majority wants universal health care. The majority of Republicans as well as Democrats want tuition-free college and tech school, and they want all this corporate control.
Well, I don't know if we can afford
lives.
all of that, but we're going to make America healthy again, one way or the other.
That I hope will
Thank you very much, Marianne
Thank you,
Williamson. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You won't get it anywhere else.